Are you getting caught up in the latest health trends and feeling overwhelmed as to what diet is best? We get it, and that's why, as leaders of wellness in our community, Joanne's Place Health Foods has created the Wellness on Purpose podcast. On this podcast, you can expect community and brand experts to share impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. My name is Marissa Laughlin. I'm a holistic nutritionist in partnership with Joanne's Place and your host for this podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. It's your host, Marissa here, and I am just sitting in shock looking at the calendar. I cannot believe that we are already halfway through October and the amount of Christmas things that I am seeing out and about. I'm just not fully there yet, we just got to say goodbye to summer and we still have that nice warm temperatures, but all of the leaves are changing. It's 100% fall vibes, but I think we're jumping a little bit too quickly to think about winter, at least in my eyes. Now, for today's episode, we are going to be talking about supporting the immune system, supporting the body in terms of stress, in terms of digestion, just in terms of your general overall well-being, while we cover one of my absolute favorite topics, medicinal mushrooms. Not only are medicinal mushrooms one of my top recommended supplements for people supporting their immune and modulating their stress, their hormones, inflammation, but I use medicinal mushrooms on a daily basis. I add them into my coffee. I add them on top of cereal. This past weekend for Thanksgiving, I made a crock pot full of apple cider and I put medicinal mushrooms in there. Not a single person knew that they were in there. I talk about them in almost every seminar and webinar. They are something that I am so passionate about, that I've seen an incredible amount of healing therapeutic benefits from. And I think just about everybody could benefit from taking that. So then for today's episode, I thought, who would be the best person to come on and talk about the amazing benefits of medicinal mushrooms? So I've asked Jason Watkins, who is the co-founder of a Canadian-owned and operated natural health food and supplement company called Purica. They are the leaders of medicinal mushrooms, which is what we are going to be talking about in today's episode. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jason onto the podcast today. Hi, Jason. Welcome to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing really well. Good to be here, Melissa.
Good. I'm happy to have you. Looking forward to chatting with you today. But before we jump into talking about all of the medicinal mushrooms, can you start by telling our listeners a little bit more about yourself and how your passion for mushrooms started?
Yeah, so back in the 80s and 90s, I was in basically medicine, pathology, pharmacology, biochem, microbiology, that kind of thing, and did several hundred hours in clinic with a combined traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine format. And then I got switched into, I started developing products when I went to the Netherlands to work behind the scenes with the ballet companies. So different ballet companies working with anterior cruciate ligament tear, median cruciate, but also autoimmune disease seemed to be a big thing. So I was trying to help the dancers, live there behind the scene, kind of like a Canadian dream. I shipped my car over there and then came back and developed a product called Recovery. It's still our flagship and really big. But then we got into mushrooms and that. And in the meantime, I was studying comparative religion and philosophy full-time for several years. And then I started to do formal studies with Tibetan teachers for the last 13 years. So in the scholastic tradition, which is pretty heavy, and also the meditative and yogic tradition. So I have a real strong inclination to put mind and body things together and try to make it fun. The Tibetans are quite funny. So I feel like we resonate. And then with talking about the mushrooms affect your mind and your body. That's why they were prized so highly by Tibetans and the Chinese and the different shamanic traditions in the East.
Amazing. So we're going to talk more about Purica as a brand in today's episode, but I wanted to start by just talking about the basics and the foundations of what we think people need to know or should know about all of the benefits from each type of medicinal mushroom. We know that this is a massive trend right now. And I personally think has been for the last couple of years. I've been using medicinal mushrooms since I want to say probably 8 or 9 years ago. So I think they're coming along and more people are starting to become aware of them because we're seeing them in everything from supplements to therapeutic drinks to skincare, snacks. There's just so many different brands and so many different products out there, which I think is amazing. But it was interesting because at the CHFA, which for our listeners, it's one of Canada's largest trade shows. It happened a couple weekends ago. And that was, in fact, one of the largest trends we saw in the market this year. A lot of new brands, a lot of new products. But when I did get to speak to these new companies about their products, one thing that they talked about was actually that they were inspired from the leaders of medicinal mushrooms, which was Purica. And I was like, I can't agree more. They really are the leaders of mushrooms. And I just can't wait to talk more about the bar that you guys have set in terms of the quality of your mushrooms, the efficacy and the research around your mushrooms, and all of that. So let's talk about that first. What are medicinal mushrooms? And some misconceptions people might initially think when they hear the term medicinal mushrooms are they the same thing as psychedelic mushrooms? So let's clear the air there to start.
Yeah, so clearing the air right away. So magic mushrooms or psilocybin, and there's the amanita species as well that are a lot more heavy and quite toxic in some. That is a really, really powerful effect on the nervous system. There's some interesting things that happen there. That's why they're starting to legalize them for treating addiction. But the medicinal mushrooms as a whole, what we're talking about are more gradual effects on your nervous system. Some are quite strong, but not like magic mushrooms. And a lot of cultures have eaten these different mushrooms forever. The reason in certain areas they didn't realize that they're talking about the same mushroom because they give them different colloquial names. For instance, lion's mane, which we know lion's mane, it looks like a lion's mane. Other cultures called it monkey's head. So they didn't realize they're talking about the same things. But these are things that you can integrate into your life, and they have medicinal quality effects on your body, but they don't stimulate or suppress. So you can easily integrate them with different drugs, different conditions, because like I say, they're not stimulating or suppressing. They're what's called adaptogens. So they're adapting up and down wherever they find imbalances. The research on mushrooms, just to kind of give you a touch on that, is back in the 80s, I was in microbiology. My teacher was also a mycologist, and this was a new burgeoning science because mycology used to be in with the plant sector. Then they realized it's a completely different animal kind of idea, so to speak. But he used an example. He said they had vats of mushroom clones, different vats in a lab, and they were exposing those mushrooms to metal alloys that were brand new. So they've never been around before. And the mushroom then would start producing compounds that had never produced before, as far as they ever knew, that would start to break down this new metal alloy. So basically it was learning. It took minutes to hours or days, whatever. And then it was really interesting because then they would challenge it again, these massive vats full of the clonal species. And immediately they had a memory and they would start to produce the compound and break down that alloy again. But in the other vats that weren't exposed, they were also doing that. They were doing the same thing. And they learned, even though they were never technically exposed to the metal alloy, they immediately knew how to break it down. What fascinated people even more is they had clones in labs, sealed labs, miles and miles away. And when they exposed those organisms, the clones, to the metal alloy, immediately they also knew how to break it down. So they don't really understand mushrooms at all. Of course, at all, sorry. You understand certain things, but how they interact with the immune system, sort of, with different reduced mechanisms, but as a whole, really have no idea. He said, the teacher back then, they have a cell wall that's like an animal, peptidoglycan, not cellulose. They store their sugar as glycogen, like we do, not starch like plants. And they produce neurotransmitters that are affecting them, but also that they can spill outside themselves to affect the behavior and functionality of other organisms, including animals that are living in the vicinity. So in other words, they're basically, the idea of mushrooms is, if you use the word cooperation and coordination, they're like a controller in the environment that's helping the environment to mop itself up, to clean itself up, and to function properly. And if the environment is too toxic, because it also will mop up toxins, then it basically produces the fruiting body, sends off spores and says kind of, see you later, guys, I tried, but it's way too toxic, and then just takes off and resets itself somewhere else. So the idea that mushrooms are kind of like the centerpiece of the functioning of the entire planet. And he even said that back then that they felt that if some unbelievable fungicide was used to kill off all the fungi in the world, that the whole planet would collapse in a couple months. That's how integrated they are and integral to the entire ecosystem. They even share their immune system with all the trees. So the tree rhizomal structures and plant rhizomes can tap into the mycelial structure under the ground, like the mushroom's rooting structure, which is the bulk of what the mushroom really is. We only see the little fruiting cap that pops out of the lawn, all of a sudden fully formed, not like a plant. Anyways, the mycelial structure underground, the rhizomes from trees not in the area can tap into it, and they share their immune system. And even if the tree, like for instance, birch trees with chaga forms a symbiotic relationship with the birch tree. And if the birch tree is in trouble, that the chaga formed on there will share its immune system and nutritive value with the tree to keep it alive and to keep it functioning. If you tear off the chaga and the environment is still not that great, it's highly likely that the tree will die. That's how integral they are to the survival of other species even. And kind of it sets up the tone for altruism when you talk about medicinal mushrooms, is the idea of giving of yourself to others to function not only for yourself, but for the entire ecosystem. So anyways, mushrooms you'll blow your mind if you start to research more on them. And that started for me back in the, like I say, late 80s, early 90s.
Wow, so much to learn. And like, I'm sure there's still an extensive amount of research that will continue to be done on mushrooms because they support so many things. And each mushroom also has, individual benefits that they can provide to us as humans taking them as well. So I want to kind of break down some of the most common mushrooms and talk about each of them does. So let's start with the king of mushrooms, chaga. Tell our listeners about chaga, what it can do for them, and why it is so beneficial.
So chaga, if you look at, say, the traditional use of medicinal mushrooms, the Tibetans invited the Chinese and other groups and from India, different clinicians, to try to form a really cohesive medicine. This is the king back over 1,000 years ago. The Tibetans were really big into mushrooms because they affect your mind. They allow you to handle stress and things like that much more easily. And because of the Buddhist tradition and the Burman tradition that was in Tibet. So anyways, that spread over all the world, and it quickly became the top medicine in Chinese medicine and the shamanic traditions. Anyways, with chaga, it was already up in the northern hemisphere, in Siberia and different regions like that. And the Soviets, when they were still a nation, they were doing research on anything, drugs, supplements, traditional medicines, herbs, different things like that, mushrooms, to deal with stress and to effectively deal with psychological stress, physiological stress for their athletes, for their cosmonauts, for their government officials. And they tested everything across ginseng, rhodiola, different drugs, all the different mushrooms. The one that came on the top for dealing with long-term stress was chaga. And it's interesting because back in the 70s, the Soviets did really, really well in athletics and that, and yet they almost never tested positive for steroids. This was a big thing back then. So wondering what they're doing. Well, they kept it secret from us for 40 years, the different mushrooms that they were using and different adaptogens to increase the productivity and the athletic ability of their, like I said, cosmonauts, athletes, different things. So chaga is something that normally grows on birch. And like I said, it can save it from the birch. It's a grouping of different organisms. 80% of chaga in the wild, which is where it gets the brown color from, is birch bark, birch fiber. So chaga actually is white. And what chaga does is it has huge levels of antioxidants, and superoxide dismutase stimulates the development of this antioxidant enzyme in your body, which is really impressive. In the northern hemispheres where they drink it, and this is, of course, this is not even Stevens, so the old saying goes, across the whole Northern Hemisphere, everybody has different diets and different things. But where they consume chaga daily, they live 10 to 15 years longer on average than their counterparts in that same hemisphere. So that's something that requires further research. But they already knew this back then, and that's what they used it for. So basically longevity, antioxidant, for helping with your skin, even blotchy skins and things like that. But also the main thing, what the Soviets found was your capacity to handle potential stressors. So it's just kind of like water off a duck's back, and that's on the long term. So that's why they integrate it. It's also, it tastes great. You can integrate it with coffees and teas if you want. I mean, those things are stimulating, so you got to watch it, but still make your own drinks, drink it every day. You can integrate it into smoothies as powders. It's an amazing thing to help you deal with stress.
Yeah, I feel like after everyone hears that, they're going to be running out to get chaga because everyone is under an extensive amount of stress these days. So anything to help can be a bonus.
Yeah.
Okay, cordyceps. Tell us a little bit more about them.
Whoa. So I'm friends with Dr. John Holliday, who's basically the world expert on cordyceps. He's also an editor in different mycological journals, things like that. Cordyceps is the most expensive natural product in the world. For instance, just for the pickers, they get about $300,000 per pound US for the raw material. And
Wow.
so what happened with cordyceps, because it's so prized, what is it prized for? And I'll gear back a second. In Chinese and Tibetan medicine, they talk about kidney, yin and yang. People think of yin and yang. Deficiency is part of aging, right? So if we kind of equated it with how we think, we would talk more in a Western language of your adrenal function, because the adrenals are the suprarenals. They sit on top of your kidneys. They are responsible for a lot of how you are able to cope with the stressors of life and with aging, how that happens. So cordyceps was used and prized by the nobility for improving kidney yin and yang in significance. I'll give you the Western terminology in a bit, but that would mean improving for us, yes, kidney function, definitely, but also a lot of it has to do with your adrenal function. So how you cope with life in particular. So they prized it so much that if you tried to take their stash growing in the Himalayas, that was punishable by death in China. So this was a really, really heavily prized thing for a great long period of time. And again, that came through Tibet first. So over time, though, they found in the 90s, they thought that the Chinese women, some of them breaking the world records, they thought they were on steroids. But they found out, no, they weren't. They were on a cordyceps tonic. So this is when everybody in the West becomes excited because it's athletic performance or whatever, or if there's specific anti-aging function. And so it started to get over harvested in the Himalayas. They stopped the production or the picking of that. Also, the pickers, to get heavier weights, were adding heavy metals to it. So because they get more money. So that was a problem. So anyways, ours are grown all in-house in pharmaceutically controlled facilities with certified organic materials, natural sunlight to mimic everything. Even the atmospheric pressures of the room are altered. But in the wild, you do have, I'm going to give you a little bit of that too in the wild versus in-house now, because it's not the same idea. Cordyceps improves your ability to uptake oxygen. So if you have problems with any breathing disorder, or you need athletic performance to improve your lung quality and health, even things like chronic conditions of the lungs, which of a lot of them, bronchitis, asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, things like that, they're ongoing. Well, cordyceps can improve the strength of your lungs, which is going to be essential with those conditions, but also athletics. It also, and this is significant increases, 30, 40 more percent uptake. Also, adenosine triphosphate, your basically energy molecule, ATP, increases by around 30 to 40%. These are unheard of. So if you had two athletes, for instance, they were really even, all time, and then you put one in cordyceps and one not, same. The one in cordyceps has a significant advantage for training and for performance, because you get better output with the muscles, with the lungs, with the heart, and even increased testosterone levels to naturally healthy levels in men and women. So a lot of women say they don't, oh, why do I need testosterone? Men, you can tell they need for muscularity, for decreased fat, for libido, for basically even confidence, that kind of thing. That's what testosterone's thought of. It's just that kind of same for women though. I mean, estrogen and testosterone have a play in men and women at different ratios, and over time they're changing. Men are becoming a little bit more like women, and women look more like men in a way, in hormonally, because of the ratios. So this picks up the testosterone ratios, cordyceps. You could talk on and on about cordyceps because it is kind of like, it is called in Asia, it's called the king. Like you talk called chaga the king, and in baby, what we're calling it now, but it was thought of as the king of the mushrooms. And it traditionally grows on caterpillars. We don't do that. We grow it on nutritive sources, again, with trace minerals, to get that really high quality active ingredient level and to affect you as a person. Basically, the first two we're talking about are, in a way, age defying. The way that you feel, the way that you behave, the way that your body reacts to healing and everything, psychological stress, it's more youthful. Sorry, that was a little bit long-winded, but that's a big one, cordyceps.
Yeah. Well, is cordyceps still as like protected these days as it was back then? Is it still very hard to get your hands on this?
Yeah, the wild strains, and that's another thing. There's many different species and subspecies or strains that certain ones produce certain compounds that are strong, others don't. And so we've naturally hybridized 7 strains to produce a super strain. But in the wild, yes, there's still moratoriums in certain areas because, like I say, as soon as it's available, that's a lot of money for especially people that don't have a lot of money. And then again, it's mixed with heavy metals. There's one thing I want to touch on quickly, is that the idea of natural mushrooms versus mushrooms that are grown in hot houses versus mushrooms that are grown in labs. Mushrooms, they think, of course, you want to stay with nature, right? Natural, natural, natural. But it's a real problem with mushrooms. And I feel the exact same in this way, because thousands of years ago, the environment wasn't toxic. Like literally, maybe toxic from things burning or whatever, but not all this man-made pollution that's gone out and radiation and everything else. Well, mushrooms mop up the environment. That's what they are, like sponges that mop up the environment. They can live, but they protect everything else in the environment by pulling it into themselves. That's why when Chernobyl went off and those people died in the forest, they didn't know what happened. They were mushroom pickers. They were picking all the mushrooms around Chernobyl like they always did, but they had concentrated the radiation and then they ate it. So the idea is you can't really you don't have these kind of environments. In hot houses, there's tons of molds and yeast and everything else in the air. Mushrooms will trap all that. That's why a lot of people think they're allergic to mushrooms. It's not the mushroom because it's a fungus. That's not really actually why it is. They treat fungal conditions like candida and that in Asia with mushrooms. It's that they trap molds and yeast and everything else, and then you react to those, similar to what strawberries do. So anyways, wild versus the lab grown controls all of that. You can UV filter the air and everything, so there's no other microbial contaminants. You grow them on nutritive sources. You can expose them to atmospheric pressures, temperature variations, natural sunlight, and keep it really pristine. So then it is a medicinal mushroom. You're using it for medicine, but you can also just use it as food. Let thy food be thy medicine kind of idea. So anyways, that's, I think, important, that whole idea between wild versus lab now. It's very essential that people that are sick or anything especially are taking lab grown mushrooms and not wild mushrooms, unless somehow they've grown it on the Tibetan plateau or in the Arctic or one of the poles kind of thing where it's pristine.
That's really good to know too. And I don't know, also, like, it would make a difference in terms if people were looking at more organic practices. You could control that more in a lab versus obviously not in wild too.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So next I want to talk about lion's mane. What do we need to know about this mushroom?
It's the most popular thing out there. I think it may be the most popular thing on the market in our industry, not just as a mushroom. The research on it, this is what I kind of do. Sometimes I do personalities, right? And I'll get into this once we got into reishi as well. But lion's mane it's like you're calm, clear, because all the mushrooms are used for stress and the immune system. They all overlap there, but then they have unique functionality. And different parts of the lion's mane, the fruiting body, the mycelial structure, the spores, produce different compounds that affect different parts of your body. Lion's mane specialty is affecting the nervous system. So you have basically the central nervous system, the brain and spinal column, of which is heavily protected by the blood-brain barrier. So things have to be able to penetrate or permeate the blood-brain barrier in order to affect the central nervous system. The central nervous system obviously needs a lot of protection. So a lot of things don't get through. Certain mushroom compounds do, lion's mane compounds do. The other one is your peripheral nervous system. You think of whenever you get injured in your arm and everything, and you might lose a bit of feeling or numbness, then it starts to grow back, the nerves and the blood vessels. That's your peripheral nervous system. All the organ structures and everything off the spinal column brain that's your periphery, the outside. And so lion's mane can affect those areas as well with a different compound that stimulates nerve growth factor in your body in different areas that then affects healing and affects your ability to feel and sense things, even your different sensual apparatus, your ears, your eyes, things like require a lot of nerve tissue, obviously. Then there's also your enteric nervous system or your gut brain. So the gut brain can operate independently. I didn't know this until a few years ago, that the gut brain or your enteric nervous system, ENS, can function on its own as a primitive kind of brain structure without the central nervous system. So affecting your entire digestive processes and integrating with your microbiome. So the enteric nervous system is an ancient system in many other animal species. It also integrates and interacts with your microbiome, which is all the microbes that live in your tract that give you immunity, help you digest foods, produce nutrients for you, control your moods and what you crave in your life because they're eating things and they're putting out compounds that affect you. That's all can be controlled by the enteric nervous system. So obviously it needs to be healthy. Lion's mane compounds also affect that, increasing nerve growth factor, increasing innervation, so that you have better motility, better peristaltic action in your gut, moving down so things don't sit in there for a long time and cause gases and cramping and bloating. That's what happens with age and with problems there. It increases innervation in the gut. So it's used for things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, mind-body coordination, those kind of things, but also for post-surgical or post-injury healing and for disorders of the gut and just overall aging. So what do you feel when you take lion's mane? If you take a high-quality lion's mane, enough of it, and this is my favorite mushroom to eat, by the way. It's something that can replace pork and seafood and things like the texture and everything. It's my favorite of all the mushrooms. If you took one mushroom alone, you notice it within the first day or two. Your ability to navigate different information streams and tie them together is just kind of like you're in a coffee shop and everything. Whoa, I got all these ideas. Then you forget them all and you have a blood sugar crash. Not like that. You're more tying together all these apparently disparate ideas in your brain or new information you're gathering. It allows you to process them and then to stay calm. That's necessary in order to process information and keep it. There has to be a sense of calm when everything's being structured together. That's why coffee doesn't have a very good effect there, because it agitates and then you can't sleep, and you need sleep in order to process. Lion's mane can help you as sleep as well, especially in the lower doses.
And when you say that that's like your favorite mushroom to take, like, are you meaning like eating the actual mushroom or are you, okay.
The texture and everything, it takes on whatever flavor you're using. I'm a vegetarian, but I'm not really a tofu kind of, I don't really like that. Never have. The mushrooms for me give you the protein and all the other things, right? Including in the capsules that we have, but you can also eat them. Lion's mane, it's not cheap. That's the problem. And you have to look for people that are picking it. But it tastes amazing. Its texture is amazing, and it takes on whatever you need to, so you can fake it. For instance, here's another thing: mushrooms. People that love calamari, but they became vegetarian. Like me, I used to love calamari. Went back in the early '80s, and they use oyster mushrooms, and then they have the batter. It tastes exactly like calamari, but it's super healthy for you, and you can harvest them yourself. You can grow oyster mushrooms. You can buy logs that are inoculated and grow them at your own home. So anyways, integrating mushrooms as a whole to eat is amazing. But then if you're using it again medicinally, that's where you really want to have the lab grown quality and really high levels of quality control.
Okay. Awesome. Now I want to talk about my personal favorite, reishi. What can you tell our listeners about this medicinal mushroom?
So right off the top, so reishi has more research than any of the mushrooms. It's been prized. It was called spirit mushroom in different cultures. And you can see again from Tibet coming there, they were focused on that. The Chinese used it in their military, yoga, qigong, tai chi, military arts, like the Shaolin monks, right? To keep super focused and calm. It's a chill pill. Like literally, it's a chill pill. So if you see something that's, most of us get irritated, get worried, get impatient, judgment of ourselves and others, distracted all over the place. Like your brain is like streamlets all over with no power. Rishi is kind of like that idea of if you had a bunch of streamlets, like your mind, a bunch of streamlets at the top of a cliff, which is your thoughts and everything going on in your brain, right? That's why you can't sleep, you can't stay calm. It's hard to focus on different things. Bunch of streamlets, there's no power. It flows over the top of the cliff. There's no power when it hits the ground. Rishi's kind of like digging a trench at the top of the mountain cliff that pulls in all the streamlets and focuses them so that when it comes off the cliff, it's one super strong, focused stream or river that could literally knock out boulders. So that's the idea of why mushrooms are prized. They seem to bring the mind's capacity to focus without being tense. The Tibetans call this the blue sky mind. They said that basically we're operating all the time in stress mindset, but they don't say that, as if our heads are in the clouds. And we have all these different color clouds, the thicknesses of clouds, gray clouds, storm clouds, white clouds, whatever. But it's still, we're focused and identifying with the clouds, and all the clouds are different, and they cause a constant state of slight tension, agitation, and anticipation, right? So they're talking about mushrooms seem to give the ability, like things like meditation, yoga, tai chi, qigong, walks in nature, calm, of tapping into the blue sky that all the clouds are in. And so you can see the clouds, but you're not caught up in the clouds. That's the idea. I think stress is we don't see thoughts and emotions and things like that for what they are. We see them kind of like enemies almost, or something that we have to try to tie together and really work with effort. But they said, no, that the idea of the mind is to open up, kind of like go above the clouds, like when you go on a plane and you see that the clouds that have been there for 2 months, the blue sky was above the whole time, is the blue sky mind is the non-stressed mindset that's associated with rest, digest, heal, calm, clear. The cloud mind is associated with fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, always faking, right? You're always faking your responses because sometimes we would like to push somebody down or run, but obviously that's what your body wants to do when you feel stressed by someone or a situation, but we don't do that. So we either freeze, which is common somewhat like with depression, anxiety, panic attacks, things like you're freezing almost, or more common is fawning. We're always faking, putting our game face on. Oh yeah, no, yeah, yeah, no, 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 that kind of thing. That's really stressful, takes a ton of energy. Rishi is very good at keeping you calm and clear so that you don't have to put your game face on. You're just kind of more relaxed. So basically, it's not falling into the same habit patterns that we have through our life that seem to protect us, but don't really. They get us really agitated. So it's kind of a long-winded way of saying Rishi's the chill pill. And then if you took it at night, a few caps, you can fall asleep better. But also, if you wake up in the middle of the night, take a few more caps, and then you can fall asleep. And sleep is a pattern thing. I had insomnia for years. It's a pattern thing. We get into ruts, deep ruts, and it's like you're going across a mud flat of activity. And it's hard ground, but your bike starts to form a rut, and it becomes easier to keep going in that rut all the time. You don't have to do any work. Rut gets deeper and deeper and deeper, but then you can't react in flexible or pliable ways anymore. You're stuck in the rut. So mushrooms give you like pull your bike out of the rut. Now you're back on the ground and you can go anywhere you want to go. That's the idea of dealing with stress, is not developing all these techniques to deal with stress, because some people seem to be very good at that. They're still tense. It's about being super open, clear, and flexible, which is the non-stress mind, which again, that's why mushrooms are prized. That's why a lot of people do meditation, but they don't ever get to that state because they're trying to contrive the meditation, stay really focused. Meditation is about opening up and being more effortless. So anyways, this is the idea of Rishi really taps into that. That's why it was so heavily prized and called spirit mushroom, is because it allows you to be calm and clear. And then whatever activity you're doing, you have a much broader spectrum because your mind is more like that blue sky mind, looking at everything without getting caught up in it.
Yes, I have 2 points to go off that. So first, that's like a huge topic in itself of stress and managing stress. It's what we need to get to understand is the body knows how to manage stress. It's just that we need to create a lifestyle and daily habits that help the body modulate in those times of stress. It's not that we are ever going to get rid of the stressors or have the most pristine ritual that is, an hour of meditation but not actually reaching a meditative state, or having a great sleep routine but not actually getting a proper REM sleep. Like, there's so many other things, but if we look at that, as you said, as an open concept of just being able to modulate as we need, that's going to be a better support system. And then obviously Rishi can help to do that. And I can actually attest to that because I am like an A-type personality. I have a strict schedule, but I also suffer from sensory overload. So if I'm out in public, or if I have any type of like background noise or anything like that, I sometimes can just quite literally snap and be like upset or frustrated because I cannot focus. But mushrooms really, really help me. And I think I do take additional reishi mushroom because I do need like that chill aspect when I am like a go, go, go personality.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is so common. What you're
Yes.
explaining right now, that's what we're in, sensory overload. It's all data bites and everything, and all these different opinions. The last 2 years has been horrible for so many people because everybody's fighting with each other about something that most people know nothing about. They're just trusting authority figures and all the different things for all the different stances, and families are broken up. There's more and more data coming all the time. Am I supposed to believe? So yeah, that's the idea. What you said is utilizing mushrooms, and then to fit into daily practice and things like you said, like you do with feeding your nervous system right, feeding your endocrine system, your whole body and mind properly. Getting a bit of movement is essential. But if we can't even get off the ground at the start, and that's what I think mushrooms help you do, is to get you out of that funk, that rut, that allows you to see things a bit differently and you feel differently, but it's also affecting your physical, like your immune system is greatly affected by it. So you feel, in ancient times, by the way, they talked of that in Chinese medicine, they talk about qi. Instead of talking about all these different compounds that we don't know anything about, that's conceptual, like prostaglandins and bradykinin, something like that. Then you depend on an expert all the time because you have no idea what that means and how all the things happen. They talk more about, say, qi. So you have a force of qi, which is you're kind of like a life force. And some people exude vibrance and life. It shines through their eyes. You can see it. It's just really easy. Others are really having a hard time. So qi is what they said in Chinese, that you're always working with that force. We'd say sometimes immune system and your vibrance or your youthfulness. And in Indian medicine, Ayurvedic, it's prana. And in Tibetan, it's lung. Those are all the same things. They were often working with that kind of energetic principle, not in this, what people are thinking of as some kind of airy phrase. No, this is science. The electromagnetic fields in your system, if you can modulate them and strengthen them somehow, or resonance, working with resonance, things like that, by what you take in your body, how you think, your exercise levels, everything's affecting that, and it makes you more youthful. So you feel that you can understand what they're talking about, and it's just given the name qi instead of, like I said, bradykinins, prostacyclins, all this hydrochloric acid, and all these different enzymes, which make no sense to anybody. They're just talking about getting the body back in balance. That's what mushrooms are so good at. And I think why you say reishi is a favorite right now, as is ashwagandha in the Ayurvedic system. That's the top of their system for adaptogens to the plant. Those things help to really relax you so that you get your head above the clouds for a bit. And even if you see a glimpse of the blue sky, you know it's there. You know you can do it. You know it's in you already. It's just trying to figure out a way that's good for you to tap into that more and familiarize with it. And that's what these ancient systems of wisdom traditions are trying to do, is get you to be able to, with whatever technique works for you, whatever concept works for you, is to get you out of the being caught in the clouds. And mushrooms were and have been and are a really powerful part of that package to help somebody get into that water off a duck's back state where things just don't seem to bother you the same. then you have so much more energy when things aren't bothering you and you're all bottled up for your physicality, but also for your psychology, spirituality, whatever, to pursue what you want when you're feeling more centered. So that's why we got into it almost 20 years ago, the mushrooms. And when we were producing the mushrooms, we weren't doing it to sell. For the first 2 years, we were giving it to people that had serious states of cancer, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis. It was doctors and pharmacists were sending us people that were last stage of these different things to try to mitigate the symptoms of how they felt due to whatever the drugs or the condition. And then it just went to a whole new level. And then we had to put it to market. So we decided to take lower margins on all the mushrooms. So our mushrooms should be, 2 to 2.5 times the price that they are right now on the shelf, but we won't do that because of everything that we do to it and how we process it to release all the compounds using a process called jet milling. And we grow it to huge levels of actives over months instead of just weeks. And then we're in the lab, we're doing things ourselves in manufacturing, whereas a lot of companies, they farm everything out. We're doing everything from top to bottom, research and development, processing, all the lengthy times you have to wait to figure things out. We put all that into the mushrooms, never anticipating that we were going to sell them at the beginning. So we didn't have any compromises. For instance, if you have a product that you love in our industry, and then when you go to put it to market, it's going to be $300 for a month's supply because it costs a lot. Almost nobody's going to buy that. So you can't really do those kind of things because you have to look at margins to sustain yourself as a company. So we weren't really looking at margins with our mushrooms. We were putting it out and giving it away to people in our community. People would come to our facility. So we had to start selling it. It was emotional. So we just thought, over time, we'll just integrate more and more and more, including the growth and everything of the mushrooms and the jet milling and everything like that. And then we'll get margins one day. So right now, it's kind of like it's a feel-good area of our company, definitely. But you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. And this is apples to oranges. We're dealing with huge levels of actives, full spectrum, easily absorbed and assimilated, easy to mix with anything. You can put it in soups, salad dressings, in your smoothies, whatever. You can boil it. It doesn't harm it. So it's kind of integrating it whatever way you can. Capsules, powders. We have a cacao drinks, the Sensations line. Just try to make it really easy for you, but also you'll notice the difference. And when you mix the mushrooms together, they become even more powerful.
Okay, well, we're on the topic of like formulations. And when you say I want to talk a little bit more about what that is. So, Purica, the brand, can you tell us more about Purica, where they're from, what their mission is, and what makes you guys the leaders of medicinal mushrooms?
Yeah, so we're right in the name Purica, we're trying to go for purity, and then cause like the first consonantal sound is kind of sacred kind of idea. The consonantal sound, first expression out of purity. So basically, we're trying to express purity in everything we do, and to us that means purity in a sense, not in a moralistic sense, is that you want to have a highly functioning, adaptable, a youthful body and mind together as one package, a pure package. So we're always focused on the body and the mind together, Purica, and we're a Canadian company. We do, like I said, we do everything from top to bottom. Most companies now, what happens in our industry across North America, maybe most of the world, is there'll be a supplier of an ingredient and they'll approach a company and say, we would like you to market this thing. We've almost got a natural product number. We've gone through the government processing through Health Canada. We'd like you to market it, either exclusive or not, and then the company does it or not. But if they do it, then almost all companies, there's hardly any manufacturing left in Canada or United States. So they'll then farm it out to a private label manufacturer, which manufactures for you and creates labels and everything. And then they just become a marketing company. There's nothing wrong with that model. The idea is they're not as tied to everything. So Purica is tied from the base. So we're getting different supplies. We are formulating according to what we want to see and the benefits that we want to see. Then we access all those ingredients from all over the world, put them together in different ratios, test them on ourselves, on our animals, on our friends, and anybody who's willing to try it, because they're not dangerous. We're not putting dangerous things. And if we get the results that we think are very impactful, like a drug-like quality, but even beyond, that you can integrate with drugs. That's essential for us at Purica. I study pharmacology. You don't know what drugs different people are on, especially the blood pressure meds, things like that. So you have to make things that they can integrate with the drugs, even if they're not telling you what they're on, or they mistakenly tell you something different. So we're making everything to be adaptogenic, that you can integrate with your different drugs and that kind of thing. Affect your mind and body. If it doesn't get the effects we want, we go back and reformulate. If it still doesn't get the effects, we'll never apply. So there's lots of things we've never applied for, but the things that we do typically take years to get out there. And hopefully you're on the right track and things actually mesh out and you get the results you want before you apply. What's happening out there mostly is you're applying because somebody says there's results with it, but you've never actually tried it to see what happens. So our company is very much about the old saying, the proof's in the pudding. We're not going to apply for things and get an NPN that we haven't seen the results with in the first place. So we've been testing and testing, sometimes years beforehand, to see if we can get the effects on multiple different things to do with health or different conditions that you're trying to mitigate or deal with. You can be assured that that's what Purica is doing. Furthermore, like I said earlier, we're making sure that you can integrate different things with drugs. So there's no stimulating or suppressive action or effects on the kidneys or the liver, unless they're positive, so that you can integrate with different drugs that may be having those negative impacts and the potential to maybe mitigate some of those negative symptoms that are or side effects from certain drugs if you are integrating. So anyways, the idea is to create something that works really well, to appreciate the ancient traditions and not to, okay, for instance, if you have a mushroom that's a whole thing, and then nowadays we can extract certain things out using hot water or alcohol or solvents or high pressure gases, things like pull certain things out, leave the rest behind. But then that's no longer the whole mushroom. And the idea of mushrooms is multiple different compounds in the mushroom working in synergy, in balance, right? Inside your body, but also just within itself. So if you are taking certain things out of a mushroom, that's distorting what the ancients would utilize. For instance, the ancients, people argue, well, yeah, but they made teas out of the mushrooms or different things. So they had a hot water extract. But I took these medicines for 2 years in clinic. They're not a hot water extract. They're like thick black and brown and floaters and everything. You're taking everything. Yes, the water soluble compounds are coming out into the water, but you're still getting the alcohol, the fat soluble, the amphipathic, the extracellular compounds, which are huge. That's what the mushroom normally exudes out of itself. And if you grow it in a liquid, they normally scrap the liquid. Ours are grown in a solid state matrix. So we're processing the entire thing. The extracellular compounds are what affect your nervous system, endocrine system, which is what the ancients prized them for. So we're about showing respect to the ancients, keeping things whole, but making them highly absorbable and assimilable by using this jet milling. And that's another process that nobody uses because it's expensive. And I get that because they can see the margins mustn't be that great for us. But the jet milling is you grind it a little bit. If you grind things too much, you damage all the active ingredients. That's why you can only grind to a certain level. Then you put it in a high pressure chamber in really low temperatures, so technically raw, and they bombard each other and break all the fibers into little tiny little bits like the chitin, and then release all the actives. So that's what we do. Everything's jet milled or micronized by using this process. Whereas other companies are using it more for injection, so they're extracting out polysaccharides, water soluble, or extracting out terpenes, and then they can inject them. Instead, we're keeping the whole thing together, so it's still a mushroom. It's still an adaptogen. It's not acting more like a drug, but it has powerful effects on your body that the ancients recognized for thousands of years, which is why they were at the top of the heap, which is science, by the way, because I'm from the sciences. But science, when you're going through constant experimentation over hundreds of thousands of years to see if something works for what you say, well, they're going to scrap things that don't work because a physician didn't get paid, say, in China, unless you were healthy. So you got paid when you were healthy. You didn't get paid when your patient was sick. So their idea is you were trying to keep people as healthy as possible. And that's where mushrooms and things like that became huge, because they're shown to keep you healthy in body and mind. That's why they're at the top of these medicines. That's why at the start of this podcast, you talked about the idea that there's this trend which to me is not going to be a trend anymore. We've been doing this for 20 years ahead of the trend. This is the future of natural medicine, is working with adaptogens and other energy type things, electromagnetics, stuff like that, like the Soviets were doing. But the mushrooms are the top of the heap for these different things. So it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger in our industry. And like I said, try integrating them even into your diet with lion's mane or oyster mushrooms, shiitake, reishi. Just start eating them, getting them from different markets, because they will affect you even at that level.
Yeah. And you're right. I do think that this is the future of preventative health. Like, could you imagine living in a world where doctors were paid for healthy people as opposed to unhealthy people? Like, I can't even fathom what that would be like.
I know, it's a whole different thought process. That's
Yeah.
why sometimes when you try to look back on the ancients, and then people will judge how different people did things for everything, especially right now with this cancel culture idea. You're looking back and you're judging from this vantage point how everything was going on, but their whole way of living, their whole way of looking at life, their whole way of interacting was totally foreign to what it is now. Even in the ancient, even in the areas where there's ancient practice still alive, they still lost so much of how they saw and interacted with the world due to the view of modernity, where everything's reduced to something material. They didn't think that way. So we can't judge from this perspective of materialism what was a completely different mindset. And we cannot say it's better or worse at all from this vantage point, because we don't even understand it. And that's why I think that mushrooms is interesting, because in the level we touched on the start of this podcast about things like how these medicinals we're talking about are different than psilocybin, magic mushrooms, which are now being legalized in treating people in clinics, like I said, for addiction, anxiety, sort of stuff like that. But the ancients used those types of things, like high doses of magic mushroom called heroic dose, or ayahuasca, or a buco, or a bufo, the toad secretion. Those things were meant, like a Zen master, to hit you over the head when the timing is right and blow your mind, which a lot of people can't take. Yeah, that song, Into the Great Wide Open, that kind of idea. When your mind, because we're living in the stressed out, caught up mind with all our habits and tendencies and the way we see the world and everything reduced and materialistic, if they knock that out of you and you're left with the wide open sky, a lot of people will freak out. And they'll grab onto something else and form a new religion or something, or just an I know more than you, they're just locked again. So what the ancients are trying to do is they only did that for certain types of people and not a lot, because you had to be ready. Other ways is slower, to slowly take someone out of the stressed, caught up mindset, to slowly see glimpses of the sky and start to familiarize yourself gradually with that. So it's not like that whoa experience, but you are getting a whoa experience, whereas your mind's more clear, more open, easier to focus, easier to navigate things that don't bug you anymore. That's why I think integrating mushrooms is so important. And that can also segue into your different, if you're doing another practice, or you want to start doing a meditation, or you want to go experience nature more, be out there in nature with trees and plants, or yoga, or tai chi, qigong, or martial arts. If you want your mind body coordination to be more quickly acting and to learn more easily instead of having to do things over and over and over, that's the stress mindset. So sorry, I'm going off in tangents, but I can't. With mushrooms, I feel like if you can affect stress, that's the whole key, because stress inhibits your immune system. It's the greatest inhibitor of your immune system. It inhibits digestion, your ability to rest, digest, heal, because it inhibits the parasympathetic mode, which is about calm and clear. We almost don't get that anymore because we're so tied up in the clouds, emotions, thoughts, stances, whatever, that we don't even recognize that that's not us. Those are changing like clouds all the time. But if we identify so much with that, we can't find unity in our, and including in our body. So the body's like, it's wreaking havoc on us. And the number one thing I think people should relate to in this is stress causes you to age faster, and it causes your body to break down faster, your bones, your joints, your ligaments, tendons, skin, everything. So if we can get out of that stress mode, it's sort of like if you are being treated, say, for an autoimmune disease or chronic inflammatory disease with corticosteroids like cortisone, prednisone, dexamethasone. Those inhibit that inflammatory process, but they also inhibit healing. They put you in a chronic stress mode. So those are breaking your body down, your spine, your bones, everything. And you accelerate the aging process. Rheumatologists know that you're knocking years off your life. Or if you have Cushing syndrome, hypersecretion of cortisone, same. Your body ages, same as animals. You're aging faster. Your ability to deal with stress is lesser, lesser, and lesser. So that's the same as chronic stress, low-grade stress, which is what we're in more and more and more now. So it's basically our opportunity to get out of that. And mushrooms are like a doorway or a gate to help you find a little bit of peace first, and then you can pursue other things in your life that allow more of that. And then you feel it in your body because your energy levels go way up. Your ability to sleep improves. Your skin will improve. Your eyes will improve.
Now, I think for our listeners right now, first, I want to reassure you that I was once in your seat listening to Jason talk about mushrooms. I've been to many talks and I've felt like, wow, these sound amazing. I need them in my life, especially after learning a little bit more about each of those mushrooms. So, for our listeners, where do you recommend them start with the Purica products? What's the first product that they should maybe integrate into their daily routine?
So you can go with the single mushrooms, and definitely some people will want that. And like you do, you add a bit of reishi extra. Uh, what I did is, like the ancients, is formulate a mixture of compounds using Tibetan, Chinese, and Ayurvedic medicine. And I created a product called Complete 360. And that's a powder, a cap, or it comes under our Zensations drink line with organic cacao as universal harmony, because that's kind of the effect you're going for. I would recommend you're doing it like that. You're integrating a combination formula. We have another one called Immune 7, which is focused on the immune system. I believe that our Complete 360 is our top combo. Then if you're looking for really intense mind, you could add lion's mane, or you really need to relax, maybe more reishi with magnesium or something like that. Or stress is your biggest overall easy long term, that would be chaga. Cordyceps, if you're an athlete, you want more strength, libido, your oxygen output, your ability to produce energy, that's cordyceps. But again, if you start with a base as a combo, which is our Complete 360 or Universal Harmony, that's giving you broad spectrum to start getting that mindset, less and less and less in the clouds and more glimpses of that blue sky. Or another way is to look at it, say your mind is like, in your whole functionality is being like in a closed room with all the doors and windows shut, and it's really dank and stuffy. And your idea is to make it better, is to clean up some of the dust in these different sections or whatever. And then this guy comes along and says, why don't you just open the doors and the windows and then let the sun in, let the fresh air in? That's what it is, a breath of fresh air. That's what you'll start to feel from your own self, a breath of fresh air, which is not controlling. You don't have to put energy into it. It's always been there. It's like a dark cave that you put on a little light, and it gives you a glimpse of the whole thing for the first time in 10,000 years. But then you know what it looks like inside. Now you just have to figure out a way to connect with that more and more and more. Then you notice it physically. And most people are focused on the physicality now, material in the body. You notice it physically, but when you notice something physically makes you feel better, it does tend to make you want to try to open your mind more, because the more that you open the mind, the more you physically feel relaxed, light, breath of fresh air. Anyways, that's why I feel like mushrooms are so big for me, and the ancients, because it's like a respect for all of that, but also integrating it even to an advanced practitioner. They'll see benefits even there. Somebody who's been meditating for years and can get in certain states, allow you to access it more readily, more easily. And that's, again, that blue sky mind effect.
Yes, and the Complete 360, I have taken that quite consistently for probably the last 5 or 6 years. And I love this product. I actually put this in my coffee and in my smoothies every day, as well as my partner. He is a paramedic. So he just has a stressful job, but he, doesn't always want to take capsules. So I get the powder form. It's so easy to use. I think it's very cost effective to do it in the powder form. It's easy to mix it into anything. And then, as I said, like when I'm feeling like overstimulated, some weeks I will add an extra reishi to keep me just at a nice chill
Yeah,
level.
exactly.
Awesome. So, last question for you, Jason. I just want you to share with our listeners where they can learn more about Purica and the amazing products that you guys have.
So if you just go to purica.com, Purica.com, and then there's different videos we have and podcasts we share, trying to touch on many different topics with different speakers, sometimes with me, sometimes not. We're just trying to give as much information as we can. And then all of the scientific data, everything. If you want to show your doctor about Immune 7, we can send them special forms there as well, because there was research 25 years ago done on that for serious conditions. Anyways, just or go to your store and into Joanne's place, things like that. Our different stores all across Canada, and learn more.
Absolutely. So I'll leave the links for the websites and also Purica's social media in our show notes on our Joanne's Place website. If you guys are interested and you want to start modulating your body to support immunity, stress, memory, sleep, you can also come and pop into one of our Joanne's Place locations and pick up your products today. Jason, I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and passion on mushrooms with our community today. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to connecting again in the future.
Thank you very much, Marissa. I appreciate you letting me on here.
Of course. Take care.
All right, take care.
If you guys are still here, thank you so much for checking out today's episode. You know what to do now. Be sure to subscribe to our channels so you're notified as soon as a new episode is released. And also find us on social media and share that you are listening to the Wellness on Purpose podcast.